Hey guys, Mustached here to review The Long Walk. So as you can already tell, I'm really late on this review. Movie reviews have gotten substantially harder to go about doing, but I'm eventually trying to catch up a little bit here. So this one is really straightforward, but it is based off of a book written by Stephen King. And I believe this is based on what other people said, like one of his first works, perhaps. But for those unfamiliar, by the way, this seems to be a trend with his work, is that his endings have always been a little bit meh. And that's already something I've heard from other reviewers, at least after watching this particular movie, is that this ending is like a little meh. And I don't know, I thought the ending was pretty straightforward, but so is the rest of the movie, so I'm not sure what they were expecting, alternatively, nonetheless. So I don't think I need to say it's a spoiler review, but just in case, who knows. Like I said, pretty late on this one. So this takes place in an alternate world, or alternate Earth, where to get the hopes up of the people, a literal long walk is brought in by a bunch of people being lotteried in, and once they're done so, well, as the tagline is simplified, you walk or die. So you could sort of think of it as a simplified, more old school English, American Squid Game, with one game that being walking. That's essentially the movie. I mean, if you really think about it, the character work is where you're focused on, and the games are like the where all the tension comes from. So this is pretty much that, but just, again, one quote-unquote game, and it's as simple as just walking. Well, simple is perhaps starting to overstretch it, depending on how long they ended up walking, that being. So we start the movie off with following Ray and Pete. These are our two main characters. Of course, there are alternative characters along the walk to give us, a bit more dynamic, as it were. And pretty much we follow the majority of this movie with this sort of small clique of individuals that sort of stick by each other. They call themselves the Three Musketeers, although it not being three. Though that would have been interesting if they had pointed that out in the movie, that the Three Musketeers in it of themselves weren't really Three Musketeers at all. Obviously, if you've seen that movie, or any iteration, there's typically even four of them in a lot of instances, if anything. But, at any rate. So this movie addresses certain aspects of this world, such as how certain things were banned in this world, of like certain educational tools and whatnot. And that once this is started, there is only allotted one winner. So with that, our path is pretty much set. Now, they don't take any discomfort or any hesitation in saying if you need to need to take a shit. The movie just outright addresses it. You just gotta find a way to drop trow while simultaneously walking, and find a way. This outcome happens twice in the movie, and in both instances the character pretty much dies shortly thereafter. So, making sure that you're eating but not overeating in this circumstance of maintaining your bodily fluids. So yeah, we learn about some of the characters as there's this character who the names of the other characters are going to be a little bit hit and miss for me, so I'll just refer to them as like a thing. So there's this certain character who goes about antagonizing this, I believe he was like a writer. He wanted to write about this experience. Or it might have been one of the other people that were further ahead. Point being is that the antagonizer does so and gets the individual to pretty much fall behind and die. And he's referred to for the vast majority, because he ends up lasting a really long time, as the killer of the group. Even though, you can see it's the military guys that are in the colonel that are doing the gunning down part. But anyways, it is only after that first initial death that the title is revealed to us, the audience. Now, in a way, like I said, it's sort of like a Squid Game in that when you are told the rules, you're told that you get 3 warnings and then you get your quote-unquote ticket, as it were. That being the equivalent of execution, essentially. Your ticket out of life is the implication. Now, it seemed unclear if the people who are in this particular iteration of the walk, because they clearly talk about later on how there were previous walks, that they had no idea what they were getting into, or they did not know the ending consequence, or maybe they did. A little hard to tell that one based on the dialogue that is provided. But nonetheless, as they are trudging along this walk, we had other you had the writer, we have the playboy, as I refer to him as in my notes, as it were. He lasted a long while too. He was sort of a part of the Three Musketeer group, and then there was one other that kind of started butting in and then kind of got in on that. But they do begin, as they are trudging along, you do start to see people like watching on, so they also must be aware of the potential outcome of everything. I mean, that is a large part of the ending itself. It does seem to be the case at the very most. But it starts off pretty small. Like you'll see like this one person, and then you'll see like a group of 2 or 3 people, a family watching on, and you get slightly different environments walking through when it starts to rain, which it does twice solid throughout the movie. You have this in which where the largest chunk of people that get executed is up this slight incline in the walk, this slight mountain region. And of course there is no resting, or if you are resting, you better make sure you're still walking, or else, that's it. So obviously it is not merely just a physical activity anymore. It does drain on the mental. as a lack of sleep can cause any number of issues, which we do see start to affect those that are not so inclined to keep up anymore. Whether it be starting to mutter to yourself, or as it pertains to just your feet wearing out in general, which is a thing that happens to like 2 other individuals. We do see that as well. Even the main character, or yeah, I would say the main character, Ray, even his own shoes give out at a certain way later part of the movie, and has continued to on foot, or on socks rather. But you know, that is not a particularly good sign. You do see how other people who have been walking for just as long, you get the bloody feet, other blood parts, the nosebleed included in that. Again, very mentally draining, as it were, and that leaving to them wanting out and them getting that way out. So we do see that long trudge, and of course we have 2 attempts of people trying to get out. One during this more where they're like along this, like, there are a bunch of these houses, and you see someone trying to off-skirt into one of the buildings, and they almost make it through, but they get shot down. This other individual pretty much strips down and then tries to abandon everything. And of course, there is the desperation of wanting to fight back, which is the only alternative outcome. We do see this affect one of the characters we have been seeing for a long time, having so many other previous people gunned down. This individual decides to fall back ever so slightly, wait for the truck to get to him, grab a gun, and shoot one of the soldiers down. And then he actually guns himself down before anything else. And so the walking marches on, and you eventually get down to your last 5 or so, and it is pretty much, you have been seeing Pete throughout this, having saved Ray, like, twice, 3 times, maybe even 4 throughout this entire movie. And it is only pretty late on where, when the death starts happening, in particular, the Playboy, as I called him earlier on, where he falls behind, and then other people start to try to get him up to try to continue, but despite even knowing that there can only still be one winner. It is sort of, again, this more psychological sort of battlefield that sort of starts to transpire between this level of trust and wanting to go back versus, heading back and potentially breaking those rules to help somebody else, only to later on, that in that moment it meant everything, and then later on it suddenly means nothing. That again, it's as simple as the tagline, walk or die. You either help or you don't help. That's it. There's no grander narrative at the end of that. And you either last or you don't last. Again, you can really just simplify everything back into this black or white narrative, as it were. And so we even see these little flashbacks through Ray, the main character, who sees his mom later on. And this is, again, one of those moments of he decides to go back for his mom, which is, well, he's not walking forward anymore, so he's up for, getting gunned down, and Pete comes back to get him again. And so they must resume. And once we get to our trio, because we eventually obviously have to get to just one person, the last of the trio is the Colonel's own illegitimate son, apparently. Now, I think this was made pretty evident pretty early on in the movie, between the interaction between the Colonel and him earlier on. Like, I think it's pretty well early established, but it is only here where that pretty much comes to its full fruition, as it were. That not even a son of the guy in charge is immune to this, to this world, as it were. And so we get this massive crowd. Now, again, the way we're encroaching upon our end here. So Pete is the one who falls first on his knees, and purposely so. He's the one who says, you got a mom to go back to, so you go on ahead, you make that journey. But again, it is that insistence of Ray that ends up coming back and says, no, you go ahead, you keep walking, we both keep walking. But then we do start to see him fall behind. And eventually, yes, the main character ends up being the one shot, and Pete, the secondary main character, ends up being the one to survive. And it was made clear earlier in the movie that his goal, Ray, was to kill the Colonel himself, and maybe that would change everything alone. So Pete follows through. Pretty straightforward. And again, I'm not even surprised, despite them talking about revenge earlier on and how wrong that is. I think this is a narrative that says, you know what, revenge, you can take it or leave it, walk or die. Again, it simplifies that line of revenge in it of itself, because there are other stories that, and you see it a lot more often than not, that revenge is often seen as this bad thing. And that's one of the reasons, speaking outside of this movie, when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, I thought it would be an interesting way to twist it, is that despite it being a revenge quest that my character was going on, to have that not be seen as wrong. And that was my entire journey as that character. And I do think that there is something to that. Because I've seen so many stories that just simply say revenge is wrong. And a movie like this says, and it questions, is it? Is it really wrong? Are you sure about that? Can we not just simplify it and just say, no, it's as simple as you do the thing. You get it done, as it were. And he gets it done, Pete does. He asks for a gun, he gets the gun, and he persists to kill the Colonel. And then he walks away. That's it. That's how the movie ends. Again, straightforward, and he keeps on walking, as it were. So, yeah, I can't say I'm too surprised by this ending, but I'm a little bit confused as to why people are not satisfied with the ending. It's pretty straightforward from the setup we were pretty much given earlier on in the movie, but when he does begin to explain that's what his what Ray's desire was to see if he can change things by taking out the leader. So, Pete says, fuck it, let's find out. Fuck around and find out is what he says, and the movie kind of implies that he kind of gets to get away with it. He kind of just walks away. Now, in terms of a flourish, I will say it's a little odd, because you do see that crowd earlier on, and then when he takes the shot, the crowd is gone. In fact, everything is gone. It just seems like it is him, the gun, and the colonel, and the guy giving the gun. That's it. I mean, you hear all that noise, but you don't really see any of it. So, it almost does feel fantastical in a way. But it does leave the question of what happens next. And I don't see any problem with that being a type of ending where it just leaves off of, well, that's up to you to decide, kind of. So yeah, I think this is a pretty solid movie. I'd give it an average 7 out of 10. I think this movie's neat. An average. Again, pretty solid. Pretty much addresses everything. It's hard to have a plot hole when the plot is as simple as you walk or die. So, ain't got to worry much about that. So there's that too. So yeah, that's my review of The Long Walk. If you ended up enjoying this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. I want to head you to my petition about small YouTubers. So get to my PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And third, to my Discord server, where you join collab, shields, all that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.